Hey everyone, welcome back to Check the Kick podcast. It can be found on Sherdog.com, and I hope you guys all had a good weekend of fights. Time to do a little bit of getting rid of the old stuff, and I just want to kick off the show with the first segment, Out with the Old. Sean O'Malley knocks out Aljamain Sterling to take the bantamweight world title. Does it by second round knockout in pretty impressive fashion. Not a flawless victory by any means. However, pretty clean performance. It's not like he got ragdolled and was backpacked to the body triangle for 3 minutes, taking short punches and defending chokes, and then kind of gets a Hail Mary knockout. That's not how this fight went. First round, Aljamain came out kind of on the pressure, throwing a lot of leg kicks, a lot of body kicks. Aljamain's offensive striking game is really predicated around his kicking, and he does that because he can do it from range, and he's fast enough to close the distance, and he knows that you're not going to catch his kicks and take him down. He had a lot of problems with O'Malley's length, O'Malley's feints, and his actual athleticism and just footwork, his ability to get in and out, his ability to switch stance and pivot on angles off the back foot. And then, he can cut an angle and then step forward and hit you with the shot. And his takedown defense looked really good. I said it in the preview of this fight. I did pick Sterling, so I'm here. I was wrong on that. I did pick Sterling, and I figured it was going to kind of look like the Sandhagen fight, where he'd be able to just kind of walk him down, cut the cage off, force him against the cage, take his back. And in the first round, Aljamain got in on a single leg, probably with like 20 seconds left in the round, and he didn't get the takedown. Round expired while he was still fighting for the takedown, and usually he's much more of a chain wrestler guy where he'll trip you up, try to take your back, whatever. But that might have been a little moment where he kind of broke a bit. Second round starts, and pretty similar to the first round, Aljamain gets in deep on a takedown, deep on like a high crotch slack. He goes for the single leg, and then he goes to the high crotch, and then eventually O'Malley is able to kind of get an underhook, fight out, kind of get his back off the octagon. Sterling continues to have that single. O'Malley's able to just kind of bounce and use his athleticism, bounce on one foot, rip his leg out, and then they're back striking again. At that point, it seemed like Aljamain definitely got a little bit desperate. He overextended on a right hand, and Sean O'Malley just beautiful pullback, slip right hand, beautiful shot, straight down the middle, kind of forces Aljamain right down, almost face plants him. Aljamain rolls to his back. Sean O'Malley goes in for the ground and pound. Some people say it was an early stoppage. I'm not upset about it. My colleague Ben, I was on the post-fight show last night for Sherdog, and he believes it was an early stoppage, and I kind of agree about it. I do think it was maybe a tad bit early, but at the same time, I'm not tripping. Like, Aljamain Sterling is known to have weird body language. When he gets hurt, he'll kind of get on the ground, and he's done it. His corner, Matt Serra, told him in I believe it was maybe the second Petrion fight, where they told him, hey, don't get on all fours and move around. Maybe it was a Cejudo fight. Either way, it's just not good optics when Aljo's on the ground and he's in trouble. He seems to be a guy that, like, if you hit Aljamain clean, he just seems to be one of those dudes that gets bugged by it. Not like Cheeto Vera, a guy who got a close win this weekend. We'll talk about Cheeto in a bit, but his reaction to getting punched or kicked or anything, his optics taking damage are not like Cheeto's. Just leave it at that. Took some pretty hellacious ground and pound he went to the post-fight press conference. So shout out to Aljo. His eyebrow was, sewed shut. I did get a new sign too. But Sean O'Malley kind of, again, just clean. Didn't take a bunch of damage. He said that he's going to make Aljo make a mistake, and he's going to make him pay for it. And he did that. Like, the shot was beautiful. He took some leg kicks, and that still seems to be a potential weak point for O'Malley. the leg kicks he took in this fight they didn't seem to bother him, but if it were 3 more rounds of it, then maybe. Either way, didn't matter. And Aljamain's title reign is over, and there is a new champion. UFC couldn't be more happy. If you go to UFC's YouTube page, this is like the first. They released this last night. I'm recording this on Saturday, the 20th, and they released this last night right after the fight. They put the whole entire round. Like, they're not making you pay for this. You want to know who won this fight? You want to know how they did it? You can go straight to YouTube and find out. And the UFC doesn't typically do that, so they're definitely trying to get behind O'Malley here. What's next for these dudes? Sean O'Malley's calling for a Cheeto fight. If the UFC gave Dan Henderson a title fight against Bisping in a rematch because Bisping really wanted that one back, I don't see why they wouldn't do it for O'Malley. O'Malley seems to want that one. The only 2 people he talked about were Cheeto and Gervonta Davis. Gervonta Davis ain't happening. As much as he wants it to happen, that ain't going to happen. And it wouldn't be smart for him to do that. He needs to have 2 more title defenses at least before he talks about doing some shit like that. And he needs to win them flawlessly. Say he knocks out Cheeto and knocks out Henry, then he could talk about Gervonta Davis. But until then, no. A fight with Henry makes sense too. A fight with Henry Cejudo makes kind of a lot of sense. Cheeto also makes a lot of sense. Cheeto won this weekend, even though he was ranked number 6 and he beat a guy on short notice in Pedro Munoz that was ranked number 10. Fight was kind of closer than it should have been. That Pedro Munoz Cheeto Vera fight, a little too close for my liking. And that's just Cheeto. Cheeto's clearly the better dude. And I'd be okay with watching that fight again. You know they're going to strike, and it's probably the biggest fight in bantamweight history. Really, if you look at it, like, who are the 2 other biggest stars in that division? Everyone loves Cheeto. Sean O'Malley clearly is a huge star. So I wouldn't be surprised if the UFC made that happen. Henry is another one of the big stars in that division. So any of those dudes make sense. Merab, too. Like, bantamweight's just so fucking good. Corey Sandhagen's out there. Umar Nurmagomedov, Merab. I mean, Song Yadong is out there. Like, Jesus. For Aljamain, he may get stuck fighting like Umar or Song Yadong. I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised if the UFC said, hey, bro, here are your next fights. Umar Nurmagomedov, Song Yadong. Umar just had to pull out of that fight with Sandhagen. We already know Aljo's going to take some time off. He said after the fight again that if Sean O'Malley did this to him, expect Volkanovski to do the same, and I kind of agree. No, who the hell at 135 wants to go up and fight him at 145 anyway? And maybe Aljamain goes up to 45, but man, I don't see like him and like Ilia Topuria would probably do bad things to him. Ilia Topuria can definitely grapple with Sterling. And he's not the one-shot sniper or the lengthy puncher that Sean O'Malley is, but he's probably a harder puncher. He'll definitely go for it. Mosar Evlov, another just scrambly wrestling dude. Volk, he's not going to get a fight with Volk. But yeah, 145 is just, for Aljamain with his age, he said I'm fine. He said he's good. I could see him coming back for one more. Dominic Cruz, maybe. Him and Dominic Cruz would be a fun fight. They can fight for the greatest bantamweight ever, or it could be marketed some way. I hope Aljo does something good, though. And, he's always been respectful. His weird thing winning the belt from Petroyan aside, he's not a bad dude. Like, he doesn't deserve the crowd to be screaming F you to him and stuff like that. Thought that was kind of shitty. All right, moving on to the co-main event. Not the barn burner striking match that we all thought it was going to possibly maybe be, but a one-sided ass kicking. Zhang Weili, Magnum. we need to start talking about her being the best strawweight ever. And I know that says a lot. I know that may seem like a reach, but she's got 2 losses to Rose, and that definitely, puts an asterisk on it. But the first fight, knockout, clean win by Rose Namajunas. Can't take anything away from Rose. Head kicks her, drops her, finishes her. Beautiful. The rematch, she lost a split decision. A lot of people thought Zhang Weili won. But after that, she goes and fights Carla Esparza, the girl that beat Rose twice. The girl that beat Rose in probably the worst fight in UFC history, at least modern UFC. Terrible effing fight. Either way, goes out there and just whips. I mean, she whipped Carla Esparza like Carla Esparza owed her money. That's the same thing she did to Lemos here. Did the same thing to Joanna Jędrzejczyk in their second fight. Zhang Weili has got all the tools. She's 34, and that is typically a little bit alarming for someone in a lower weight class, but sometimes sometimes some of these athletes are different, and Zhang Weili's athleticism is different. Her cardio is different. Her power is different. Her fight IQ is better than ever. I mean, this is the definition of firing on all cylinders. You don't find many other fighters that have the ability to impose the grappling like that, land the punishing shots, get out of bad submissions, keep their composure, and never get tired. Zhang Weili didn't tire in this fight at all. And I kind of accredit this to her going to Arizona for that fight camp, even though she lost against Rose in the rematch, going down there and training with Henry and Davison Figueiredo. I think that training with Henry really, opened her eyes to how good of a wrestler she can be. And she's just so physical. I thought Lemos, and again, I was wrong with this, and I picked Lemos in this fight. I thought Zhang Weili was going to just welcome a brawl, and I felt that Lemos was going to be the cleaner pocket puncher. And in the very few moments that they were, striking with only their boxing, Lemos had a tiny bit of success, but it just didn't matter. I didn't like Lemos conceding, either jumping on submissions and burning her arms out. Like, you're not like with that modified ninja Bravo choke that she had deep in, was it the second round? That's like, why are you throwing Hail Marys 1/4 of the way into the fight? Like, it's just not a good look. That's what you do in the 5th round after you've lost 4 rounds. You need to be trying to avoid these positions. And over again, she was working back to her feet. Shout out to Lemos. Her cardio held up. She took an F ton of shots. The biggest strike differential in UFC women's history. I think it was like 280 something to 29. You can find the stat somewhere. It's on Sherdog.com. I love that Zhang Weili would, instead of allowing Amanda Lemos to like post on a hand and then rip her post out from under her and then smother her back into the ground. Anytime Lemos would post and kind of, move her head a little bit, Zhang Weili would just punch her behind the ear a bunch of times and then break her posture by just beating her head in. It was pretty dope. A lot of kicks at range from Zhang Weili. As the fight went on, her boxing became more successful. She was able to hurt Lemos and drop Lemos later in the fight. Was it in the 4th? I didn't like how Zhang Weili got touched up a little bit in the boxing, but again, if anyone was going to make Zhang Weili pay for her defensive lapses, it was going to be Amanda Lemos. And if Lemos couldn't do it Saturday night, I don't know who else could. We saw Jessica Andrade try that, and Zhang Weili balled her up and threw her out of the octagon. Rose tried it and had a close fight the second time with her. I just don't need, like, who else is a sharp power puncher that can defend her wrestling at 115 right now? No one. Zhang Weili is going to have the same. She's going to be able to. She's so good now that she's going to have the George St. Pierre effect, where she can out wrestle the strikers and then she can outstrike all the wrestlers. And she's going to, like, we all thought that Tatiana Suarez was going to be the next big thing, but Zhang Weili might be the best wrestler in that division too. That like reverse crucifix that she gets on people is dangerous. She's so overwhelming. And her kicks at range were good. And then just anytime she wanted the takedown, she got it with force. Her control was good. Her ground and pound was great. Yeah, she got buzzed by a really clean, straight puncher here and there. But this was like, again, this was the most lopsided fight in women's UFC history. This was worse than Aldana versus Nunes. A lot of shades of Nunes versus GDR were like the tiny little moments GDR would have, but that shit just didn't matter. Lemos just got beat up real bad here, especially for her age. I don't really know what the future is going to hold for someone like her. We'll talk about the future of this division in another segment of the show, but maybe she fights someone like Mackenzie Dern or like Jessica Andrade, or maybe some up-and-comer. Tabitha Ricci, maybe. I don't know. For Zhang Weili, she's got Yan Xiaonan. Supposedly, some Chinese representative for the UFC said that just in like 12 hours, Zhang Weili's fight on their social media got over 1 billion views. 1 billion. So Zhang Weili's a huge star over there. Yan Xiaonan is out there. Tatiana Suarez is out there, I guess. I could see her waiting for the Shevchenko Grasso fight and maybe going up there to fight one of those girls. I always thought Shevchenko was going to have a huge athletic advantage over Zhang Weili previously, and there were talks of it a couple fights ago, and I was like, probably not a good fight for Zhang Weili. I think Shevchenko would beat her ass. And now, I don't know. Maybe Shevchenko could have some success with the boxing. Grasso could have some success with the boxing. But we saw Shevchenko take Grasso down. I think I'd love to see Zhang Weili fight either one of those women. I think she might be ranked number 1 in the Sherdog's pound for pound rankings, if not probably number 2. I think I saw on the Slack that they were wanting to bump Zhang over Shevchenko. I don't have a problem with it. Zhang is just damn good. Yan Xiaonan is probably the fight to make, though. I think Yan Xiaonan just makes the most sense, unless Mackenzie Dern can go out there and get a win somewhere. But she did just get matched up, and I think a win over Jessica Andrade doesn't mean what it used to. It makes the division fun. This is always women that are fighting like this are always going to make us watch. And I just pulled up the rankings for that division. Rose is ranked number 2. Rose is fighting up at 125. That's always there for Rose, since she does have those 2 wins over Zhang Weili, and I know Zhang Weili would probably want that one back. Tatiana Suarez, Amanda Lemos is ranked number 5. Yan Xiaonan is ranked number 3. Unless Mackenzie Dern can kind of really do something special to Andrade. And I think that's probably why that fight just got made, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Either way, Zhang Weili's a shit. I think she's probably the best strawweight that's ever existed, that's ever fought on the UFC roster, even though she lost to Rose twice, and she's continuing to improve. Her fight IQ is there, and I like that she is really leaning on her athletic abilities and her strength and winning fights like this. Shout out to Zhang Weili. And she's speaking English. She's the shit. Moving on to another pretty one-sided drubbing, one that got a 30-24 scorecard. Ian Garry, just dog walking poor Neil Magny. lead up to this fight kind of sucked. Lead up was kind of annoying. I didn't want to come on here and say that because I kind of started to like Ian Garry, but man, all of the Conor McGregor, you'll do what you're told stuff. Like it was really like, I thought he was stepping into his own lane. I really, really did. I really thought the kid was stepping into his lane, and then he goes out there and does the Conor repeat. And I was just like, damn it, Ian Garry, damn it. I still like you, but damn it. The thing with Neil Magny, where Neil Magny said he spanks his kids, I'm just going to use light terms here. And Ian Garry kind of like really grabbed that because I guess Neil Magny said something that how he was going to whip his ass, how a father would whip his son or something like that. And Ian Garry's like, you beat kids. And Ian Garry really held on to that and posted a bunch of stuff on the social media. Fight week was just shit for this fight. It just got kind of annoying in my opinion. I still do like Ian Garry though. And he seemed to take a page out of the Santiago Ponzinibbio book where he just pressured Neil Magny. Neil Magny doesn't have anything. He doesn't do anything well enough to stop you from pressuring him if you want to really get on the front foot and kickbox with him. He's just not punishing enough anywhere. His counter punching isn't just good enough. His front foot game just isn't good enough. He's great in the clinch, and that's his thing. And he's really good at kind of tantalizing mid-range fighters, mid-level fighters, into having a weird clinch war where someone like Phil Rowe probably has all the athletic abilities and all the abilities to go out there and beat Neil Magny, but he just gets a guy like him at that level with that mentality just gets drawn into a Neil Magny fight. Chiesa did the same shit. Chiesa won, but still got stuck in a Neil Magny fight. And you can look at Neil Magny's resume. The dude's fought everybody and, had so many of those weird clinchy fights. Garry didn't have any of it. Garry was stronger in the clinch, even though Keith Peterson was literally allowing him to have an arm out of the octagon and hook onto the octagon. Ian Garry had an underhook and an overhook, and then another overhook over the fucking octagon. And Keith Peterson is standing on the other side of the overhook like, bro, run over and slap that arm off. When you see them grabbing the cage, the refs come and slap the hand. And he just let that shit slide. Not like it made a difference. Again, he got a 30-24 scorecard. Neil Magny got hit with a leg kick immediately down on his butt. You could tell there was an athletic difference. You can tell there was a power difference. That was kind of the story of these top three fights. Just Sean O'Malley probably being the faster and better athlete than Aljamain and definitely using it to his ability with that pullback right. Zhang Weili just being a little bit stronger, a little bit more athletic than Lemos and really using it. And Garry did it here again too. Garry's leg kicks just crushed him. His boxing, I'll give it like a 7 out of 10. Like he still buzzed Neil up, had him hurt. But I think, Ponzinibbio at the time where Ponzinibbio was firing on all cylinders, he got him out of there with TKO, like stoppage with the boxing. And there were moments where he destroyed both of Neil's legs, especially the lead leg. But Neil would get crushed with a kick, kind of hobble off and skirt around the outside in the warning track. And Garry was able to kind of find him with a couple punches, but I expected him to more, throw a looping hook and kind of cut the angle and maybe force him to run into a big looping hook. Kind of similar how Charles Oliveira finished Michael Chandler when Chandler was hurt and skirting around the octagon. He really cut the corner and leaped in with a big hook. I really expected Garry to do something like that. Either way, it didn't matter. The leg kicks alone were enough. Garry didn't even have to box in this fight. He had Neil Magny butt scooting across the whole entire octagon. And he just embarrassed him. I didn't like him flicking him off and stuff either. Like there just wasn't any bad blood there. The fight was too short notice for them to have any bad blood. Like do that, create the drama, get the bad blood, do all the things. But like, it's Neil Magny, man. Like I didn't love all that. he even took Magny down and was landing ground and pound. Like, he beat Magny everywhere. His boxing was fine. His jab was fine. His body kicks are great. His head kicks are great. I love how Garry feints with the hips, and then throws kicks with no tell. That really, really, really confused Magny, just firing kicks. That's his best tool, is kicking without. You don't, like, he doesn't switch his hips. He doesn't pivot and fire. Like, he is just very fluid. It's like water, literally. His kicks are just chef's kiss, and no tells. They're great. Moving forward for Neil Magny, I don't know, dude. I think he's in the top 15. I have no idea who he should fight next. There's, I mean, he's Neil Magny. He's going to be around doing this probably for the next 2 or 3 years. He, you know, him and Michael Chiesa could like rematch, or maybe he could fight Vicente Luque, something like that. Maybe Sean Brady needs a win or something like that. I don't know. For Ian Garry, per the UFC rankings, Ian Garry was ranked number 13 and Neil Magny was ranked number 11. He called for Wonder Boy. I think a fight with him and Jeff Neal makes sense. Just rebook that fight. I also don't mind the Wonder Boy fight. Shavkat Rakhmonov would make some sense too, but I don't think the UFC should just take their new toys and do this with them. And I know they both, like, Ian Garry did this camp a lot at Killcliff. I know he was down at Shudo Box 2 for this and even brought in Chris Curtis, but Shavkat is also a Killcliff dude, and Killcliff just needs to stop training all these fucking welterweights like Vicente Luque, Gilbert Burns, Usman was out there forever. Just all these welterweights come out of this damn gym. Jeff Neal or Wonder Boy makes sense for him. Shoot him back up in the rankings. Or you can give him the winner of Kevin Holland and Jack Della Maddalena. Kevin Holland is ranked number 12. You're going to assume that Ian Garry is going to get shot up to probably number 10 or number 9. He might jump Sean Brady. And knowing the UFC, they'll probably jump Sean Brady. But I still think that maybe the winner of Jack Della Maddalena, Kevin Holland. But again, that's the UFC taking their toys and bashing them together. And they're already doing that with Holland and Maddalena. But Holland is like good enough to probably win a world title at welterweight if he gets match made properly. But he's also a dude that just talked about taking a fight at middleweight right after this really impressive win he just had over Chiesa. So who the hell knows with that guy? Shout out to Garry. This is a flawless victory. Took no damage. Hopefully he has a quick turnaround. I think he might have said something about December. I don't know. Don't quote me on it. Yeah, Wonder Boy in December. I hear that there's rumblings that they did offer Wonder Boy this fight and he's turned it down, but that was probably the short notice. Give these dudes a full training camp. And if Ian Garry wants to fight Wonder Boy, he better be damn sure his weight is in check. Don't F around. Michel Pereira just got forced up to middleweight and he's fighting Marc-Andre Barriault. So don't miss weight. He might get forced out of the division if you do it to Wonder Boy. And just to wrap up the weekend, quick touch on PFL. Renan Ferreira destroys Maurice Green. Big counter right hand. Not as slick as Sean O'Malley's, but more, I don't know what's up with Maurice Green. I don't know how much longer he'll do this. He's getting main event slots and just getting obliterated. And then Larissa Pacheco, she looked great. Knocked out her opponent. It's the third time that she's fought her too, and they're both up at 155. This time they were fighting at women's featherweight, and it was like 13 seconds or something absurd. Pacheco just went out there, walked her down, and crushed her. It's too damn bad that Pacheco got into the UFC when she was as young as she did and had those weird losses like against Andrade and stuff, because if she were, I'd love to see her fight Amanda Nunes at 145. It ain't ever going to happen, but I'd love to see it. either way, shout out for Pacheco. She's on her way to making another $1 million. It seems pretty certain. The woman she is fighting, Russian Sambo specialist that has a bunch of submissions, and she's probably going to beat her. Because if she beat Kayla Harrison, I'm assuming that she'll probably just be able to do the same thing for the $1 million. Shout out to both of those guys, guy and girl. Sorry. Pretty fun weekend all around, though. Hobo Cop killed a man. Cheeto got a big win. All around cool weekend. Moving on to what's hot. We are here to talk about the demise of Jessica Andrade. Jessica Andrade just took a fight for November. Yeah, she's coming back. And it's against Mackenzie Dern, which was a winnable fight for her. I don't know how much it is anymore. And you kind of have to start feeling for Jessica Andrade. I don't know if Jessica Andrade is trying to fight out her contract. I don't know what she's doing. I don't know who her manager is. But man, you know, that standing arm triangle choke of Amanda Lemos. And if you go back and watch that fight, I did for my tape study for the Zhang Weili fight with Lemos, but Lemos had a lot of success, a lot more success than people think on the feet. And then she kind of overextended and walked into that arm triangle. And then the absolute shit kicking she put on against Laura Murphy. Like, you did not think that she would go from that to kind of getting just outclassed in a super clean performance by Erin Blanchfield on short notice, and then takes a fight against Yan Xiaonan, and that was like Yan Xiaonan's best performance. Walked onto a beautiful overhand, got crushed by Yan Xiaonan, and then she fought Tatiana Suarez just on August 5th in a short notice fight. Two of these three, she got 3 finishes in a row. Two of them are submission. One is by knockout, and the Tatiana Suarez one was definitely not what was the best loss, you know, as far as the damage that she took. But Erin Blanchfield outstruck her, jabbed her up on the feet, and then choked her out. And then Yan Xiaonan just crushed her with a super concussive punch. And then the weight class moving around. I don't like Jessica Andrade moving weight classes, taking short notice fights. This is again going to be at 115 because she is fighting Mackenzie Dern. She didn't look great against Tatiana Suarez, but Tatiana Suarez didn't look too great either. She was like jumping on guillotines and stuff like that, where she could have probably tried to use her footwork and maybe get a boxing game going on someone like Tatiana Suarez. But this is what I'm thinking the UFC is trying to do. I think the UFC knows that they have Yan Xiaonan, and that could be a potential title fight. But I also think that they know Mackenzie Dern is a big-time fan favorite, and they could throw her ass in Vegas. And if Mackenzie Dern goes out there and rips Andrade's arm off in one round, I would not be surprised if she gets a title shot with Zhang Weili over Yan Xiaonan. And women's 115 is just good. A lot of them are getting older, but there are people coming up. I'm just really surprised Jessica Andrade is this willing to take this many fights over and over again. And I don't like the turnaround. It's too quick. November 11th. It's August 20th. She's just got finished. She's been finished. She got finished 3 times in 2023. She's going to fight 4 times in 2023. February 18th, May 6th, August 5th, November 11th. I don't know, man. And I really like Jessica Andrade. But she is just, this is a plane crashing, potentially starting to catch on fire here. Um, I just don't like it. And what we're seeing from Andrade and what we saw from Mackenzie Dern last time around, Mackenzie Dern is super defensively porous, but she will throw bombs. And I would not be surprised if she goes out there and club and subs Jessica Andrade, hits her with something, and just head and arm triangle chokes her, or, gets full mount and then rolls into like a triangle armbar type thing. Jessica Andrade could also very well go out there and knock out Mackenzie Dern, because again, Mackenzie Dern is super defensively porous. But the way these two gals are trending, it's just not looking good. I don't think there's odds released on this fight yet. I'm not going to look them up. You guys can. But man, just what's hot is just the demise of Andrade, unfortunately. And I think more people will be talking about this throughout the week. And if not, oh well. But I do think it's definitely something that we need to take a look at. I'm curious to know how many fights she has left on her contract. I'm curious to know what she's thinking and what her manager's thinking. Does she need money? Is there something going on? It's just not a good look, really, at all. Hopefully she can get it done against someone like Dern. And if she can't, that's going to be 4 in a row. And if Dern beats her, it's probably by finish, 4 in a row by finish. And she might not be in the UFC anymore. Who knows? PFL would probably love to have her to fight like Dakota Ditcheva or something like that. But man, just the demise of Andrade again, it's not trending well for her. Last subject I want to talk to you guys about real quick is Conor McGregor's recent tweet saying that he will not be eligible to fight in December. Find it a little funny. He says that the UFC and USADA has taken away from his livelihood. However, if you watched this past season of Tough, you probably noticed he may or may not have looked a little bit enhanced, to say the least. And he cannot pass USADA testing. He's not willing to go in and enter normally like every other athlete does. And he wants to have some sort of exception that they may have tried to offer for him. However, they've declined. And they told him you need to be part of the USADA testing pool for however much time. And he's probably still going to get some sort of exception. But still, he's not going to be able to fight. So the bout with Michael Chandler's, I'm going to say postponed, but quite frankly, it's probably off. And that kind of sucks for Michael Chandler. He's, the dude had to do the whole entire season of Tough. His team clearly stomped Conor's team, and that was the whole idea behind their fight. And now, ever since the BMF thing with the Dustin and Justin rematch, he's been calling out Justin Gaethje, and if I'm Michael Chandler, Conor's a huge payday, but man, you could probably even get a fight in. Michael Chandler, I saw a video of him hitting the bags today. He looked like he was in damn good shape. He always is in good shape, but I'm just curious to see what Chandler's next move is going to be, because he's no spring chicken. He's not a young dude, so I'm sure he'll want to get a fight in, and there are plenty of fights for Chandler out there to take. He can do fun fights, or he can do serious contender bouts. Him and Fiziev, something like that'd be fun. Or him and Arman Sarukian would be a blast. Throw him on the co-main of a pay-per-view. That's Michael Chandler. He's a pretty big star. I don't even know if Conor does a lot more tweeting than he does fighting. But I also wouldn't even be surprised if Conor's just like, the hell with it. I don't want to deal with USADA. I don't want to deal with this. I have plenty of money. I don't need to fight. He'll probably always want to fight, but he wants to just do a short training camp and just fight right then and there. If he was allowed to fight tomorrow, I'm sure Conor would fight. I don't think it's the fighting part that Conor doesn't want to deal with. It's probably the USADA and just all the things that go into having a fight under the UFC banner. A professional MMA fight is not easy, and it takes a lot to do. Do feel really bad for Chandler, though. He seem to be trying to wait this out, and it just doesn't seem like it's going to materialize for him. But again, there are tons of fights out there for him. Moving on to the final segment of the show, in with the new. We've got some pretty good fights coming up this weekend. UFC Singapore, it's pretty funny because they are doing this in the ONE FC backyard. This is their first fight that they've held in Singapore, first event over there. And they've definitely brought in a lot of their Asian fighters, couple of their winners from Road to UFC, stuff like that. But there are a bunch of pretty good fights on the card. Caceres and Giga Chikadze is a good fight. I'm not picking that one for you guys. The ones I decided to go over are Spann versus Smith, Blanchfield and Santos, and Holloway and Zombie. I think that the first fight we're going to talk about probably has the most title implications, and that is Erin Blanchfield versus Taila Santos. Current odds where I've got him, Blanchfield's at -148. Santos is at +124. I pulled these odds on Sunday night. That was the 20th. So these odds definitely probably have shifted. Blanchfield as a small favorite, Santos as a small underdog. Both of these girls, with a win, both of these girls could totally be fighting for the women's flyweight belt. I don't know if Grasso and Shevchenko are going to go into a three-peat depending on what happens here. I think if Shevchenko were to win her belt back, it would just be a blip on the radar and she'd be back to doing her typical things. And if Grasso is able to beat Shevchenko twice, then there's going to be no third fight because it'd be 2-0. For Taila Santos, she losing her debut to Mauro Romero Borella via split. I was very like, man, I don't know what to expect from this girl. She's, just her fights on the Brazilian regional scene, a bunch against of lower level opponents, and then having that kind of drubbing and I'm not going to call it a drubbing, but pretty clear win on the Contender Series against a girl that was kind of a nobody. After that, she went and fired off pretty good wins, like her win over against Molly McCann. That was a pretty good win. She has wins against Jillian Robertson. She really dominated a super heavy grappler in Jillian Robertson, defeated Roxanne Modafferi. That rear naked choke against Joanne Wood was pretty impressive. She went out there, hurt her on the feet. And then that split decision loss where, off the top, I know two of my Sherdog colleagues in Ben and Keith both scored that fight for Taila Santos. I personally scored it for Shevchenko, but that is not something worth fighting about, because clearly Shevchenko, lost big portions of the fight, got controlled a lot, got stuck in that body triangle from behind, kind of, talking about Aljo, but this was a very Aljo-like performance from Taila Santos against Shevchenko, fighting for the belt. She's definitely the bigger fighter of the two. We'll talk about Blanchfield, her record and everything. She's good here in a second, but Taila Santos is definitely going to be the bigger girl. She's also 30 years of age, and Erin Blanchfield's 24. Santos may end up being that brick wall that Blanchfield ends up running into. I personally don't like this fight either. I think that Blanchfield should be a little bit more slow-rolled. Based off her Andrade performance, she's definitely getting shot up into the stratosphere, and she's a young, good-looking girl. So of course, but this could be a fight where Blanchfield is really up against someone that can match her strength. Blanchfield's wins in the UFC have all been, pretty good, and she's got pretty good wins. Her only loss is against Tracy Cortez, and every time I talk about Blanchfield, I'm going to say that I believe she won that fight, but she's got pretty good wins. Like even in Invicta, she's got wins over Kay Hansen, UFC someone that's on the roster, maybe not for long, Victoria Leonardo. She's got wins against Brogan Walker, Sarah Alpar. The Miranda Maverick win was a great fight to watch. Miranda Maverick was a highly touted prospect at the time, and Blanchfield just went out there and just dogged her in the grappling, beat her every which way. That high elbow guillotine that she got against JJ Aldridge, she didn't look great in the beginning of that fight, and then kind of started to, she couldn't get Aldridge down, which was a problem. But then, still got the finish in the second round there. The Kimura against Molly McCann was savage. And then the way she fought against Andrade, she seems to finally be making those fast twitch athletic increases too, where she's kind of getting older into her, more adult body, where her jab and her crosses were, anytime Andrade would step in with a hook, she would just pop her with a quick jab and really, cause Andrade to reset over and over again. And then whenever she wanted to grapple with her in the second round, took her down, rear naked choke, easy peasy win. And it was kind of a brave, for what we know about Andrade, Blanchfield could have gone out there and really pressed a high activity grappling wrestling game against Andrade. And no, she fought her in a super brave way. A lot of looking at Taila Santos and her record, they both have fights against Molly McCann. I could never imagine Molly McCann going to a 3-round decision with Erin Blanchfield. When you watch the tape on that, and the same as Jillian Robertson, Jillian Robertson was able to go to a decision, still lost, but Jillian Robertson was able to go to decision with Taila Santos. And I just cannot see any MMA math doesn't work. And definitely Taila Santos is firing on all cylinders. She's fighting as best as she ever has. Look what she did against a champion. But it could also say that maybe Shevchenko is declining a little bit, because right after that, she lost the belt. She got finished by Grasso. Going into this fight, I just had a bad feeling, and I still have a weird feeling where, and I'm sure the odds are much closer to pick'em. This should be a pick'em fight, but I'm starting to have a feeling, and I've been having a feeling for about a week or so, that, man, Taila Santos may just be the one to shit in the apple pie and ruin the UFC's plans. But then I start looking at who they fought, and man, I'm going to pick Erin Blanchfield. Those two fights back in 2020 with Molly McCann and Jillian Robertson are what is, and I'm concerned that Taila Santos is able to defend takedowns and be the bigger girl with maybe a little bit more pop in her punches, and keep her at the end of some strikes, and maybe hit her with a couple overhands that cause Blanchfield to reset and bloody her up a bit. I could totally see that happening. But I feel like in even if they crash into each other a bunch of times, I could see, if Taila Santos tries grappling at all, she may just get stuck in that, that high elbow guillotine. Yeah, I think Blanchfield might just submit her if they try to grapple. Multiple time BJJ, high level champion, even as a junior too, like a youth champion. Blanchfield is a prodigy, and I'm also kind of rooting for her too, because I think she just makes the division more fun. I love young contenders, and women's flyweight is just better than ever. It's fun as hell, with maybe Shevchenko's potential decline and all these young contenders shooting up. Keep an eye on this fight. It's not the third from the top, unfortunately, but this fight should be the co-main event. If it wasn't Max Holloway and Korean Zombie, it's the most important fight on the card when you look at the rankings, title implications, all that shit. But it's 1, 2, 3, 4. It's the fifth from the top. So, this is definitely more important than Giga Chikadze and Alex Caceres, even though that's going to be a fun fight. This is the fight. Speaking of the co-main event, bumping right up all the way up to the top here, we got Anthony Smith taking on Ryan Superman Spann in a rematch that is, I'm not going to say unwarranted, but maybe unwanted, because I don't care about seeing a Anthony Smith versus Spann rematch, especially kind of after these two dudes have been looking as of late, unfortunately. Odds on this fight, very close. Again, I pulled these on August 20th, Sunday night, so these are subject to probably change. Smith's at a plus 105, Spann's at minus 125. Spann's a slight favorite, even though Smith clubbed and subbed him and finished him in Smith's last win. That was in September 18th of 2021. Prior to that, he was on a 3-fight winning streak, Anthony Smith. He triangle choked Devin Clark, TKO with the perennial nerve kicking of Jimmy Crew, and then got that rear naked choke club and sub on Ryan Spann. Prior to that, he lost 2 fights. One of them in May 13th of 2020 was that terrible shit kicking he took from Glover. After that, Rakic kind of beat the brakes off him too and modeled a similar game plan. He beat Gus. I mean, Anthony Smith's fought everybody. The dude's got over 50 pro fights. His numbers look like 36 wins and 18 losses. As for Spann, Spann's another guy that, he's got just about, this will be his 30th pro fight, 21 wins, 8 losses. He's coming off that loss to Nikita Krylov, that triangle choke, where he showed a little bit of he kind of did what Nikita Krylov usually does and loses in a weird way. He knocked out Dominic Reyes in 2022 with a jab, but that's just not looking good at all. And then he did guillotine Iwan Kuchalaba right after Smith beat him. This is a really tough fight to pick because Anthony Smith's on a clear decline. And probably the only ones that don't see it are himself. Even his loved ones and his coaches probably see this pretty clear decline where, like, in the third rounds of his fight with Glover Teixeira, he was like handing his teeth to Jason Herzog. It's a hard fight to watch. Like, doing tape study, I'm like this, I'm doing tape study like this. Like, it's a tough fucking fight to watch. His fight with Rakic, yeah, he got grounded out. Rakic is a big dude, crushed him with leg kicks and then took him down and kind of laid on him. The loss against Magomed Ankalaev, he wasn't doing terrible in that fight, but he got injured. And then his last fight with Johnny Walker, May 13th of 23, he was like talking to himself in the octagon saying like, you're trying to hurt my family and stuff like that. And that was a big red flag for me, where he was like trying to psych himself up to get himself going. Took tons of damage with his legs. And Anthony Smith's always been a guy that's always been too tough for his own good. But I think that may be finally catching up to him. He just could not get going against Walker. And Walker is a guy that, yeah, he's huge and he's dangerous. But Walker's been a guy where I still to this day, I feel like if you're a 205er in the UFC, like any 205er could just walk up to him and punch him really hard because he's not the most durable dude. And he just had no answer for leg kicks in 2023. And he had so many injuries. If you listen to his podcast, him and Bisping, he talks about his injuries, and the dude's had, sepsis and like terrible infections, and like his body is just falling apart. He's had broken hands. I know that's another thing he's talked about. And like his head is very durable. He's hard to hurt. When it comes to like, he took so much punishing ground and pound from Glover and never went out really. Like I've seen him take tons of punishment to his head, but I think his body, if Spann touches him, I think he could probably take some of Spann's shots. But if Spann just goes out there and leg kicks him a bunch. When this fight happened the first time, I thought it was probably like 60-40 odds in Smith's favor, or like 55, percent chance for him to win, 45% chance for Spann. Now I think it's probably like a 65% chance Spann wins this fight. Spann makes a lot of mistakes. Anthony Smith's boxing is good. He's relied on clean technique. He's a pretty good grappler, submissions against Gus and stuff like that. He's a good grappler, especially if he can hurt you with his boxing and then take you to the ground. He is a guy that can, do some damage with his hands. But man, I could just see Spann. Spann is bigger than Smith, and Smith is a big dude. I could just see him really going out there trying to jab Smith anytime Smith tries to crash the pocket with his punching combinations and just kicking him in the legs. If he kicks him in the legs for 3 minutes straight and then starts to let his hands fly, I could see him probably hurting Smith, and Smith will shoot on takedowns, and Spann has a good guillotine. I could see him hurting him with leg kicks and maybe stinging him with something with his hands, causing Smith to shoot a bad takedown and just hit him with a guillotine. That's kind of what I see happening here. Moving on to the main event, we have Max Blessed Holloway versus Chan Sung Jung, better known as the Korean Zombie, in a fight that should be fun for two UFC featherweight OGs. The odds heavily favor one of these guys, and if you've made it this far, you probably either know who it is or you could pretty surely guess it. Max Holloway is an 8-1 favorite. He's minus 800. Zombie's coming back at plus 520. This is a tough fight for Korean Zombie, and both of these dudes wanted it. Zombie said, I'd love to fight Max Holloway as a going away fight, and if he does fight Max Holloway, that means he'd probably fight. That means he's fought all the three best featherweights that have ever existed, in my opinion. Max, Aldo, and Volk. I'm not surprised Max obliged this fight, because Max has either been fighting the world champion or every single person that should be fighting the world champion, but instead fights Max. Zombie lost quite a bit of his career, when he was in the Korean Army. They're forced to do that, unfortunately. But he's got pretty good wins. Like, the dude Bravo choked Dustin Poirier. The bad part about that is it was in 2012. Twistered Leonard Garcia, very first twister in the UFC. Right after that, he knocked out Mark Hominick, and the dude's been in like a main event ever since. The fight with Yair Rodriguez was absolutely nuts. The knockout against Moicano was super impressive. That's when Moicano was down at 45, and he should have probably always been a 55er. The knockout against Frankie Edgar, that was another super impressive performance from the Korean Zombie. He was really firing on all cylinders there, and that's a term I'm using a lot tonight. The loss that I don't like is the Brian Ortega loss, where he got clipped once, hurt, never recovered, and just fought a terrible fight. And we were all thinking that Brian Ortega went away, and Brian Ortega took a long leave of absence in that moment, and we thought Brian Ortega went away and became a Max Holloway level striker. Turns out that's not the case. Between his losses to Volk and Ortega, he did beat Dan Ige, 5-round unanimous decision, semi-close fight, kind of clear that Zombie won. It's been a while since Zombies fought. I'm glad he took about a year and a half off. But his loss back in 2022 to Volk was a really tough loss. He couldn't get out of first gear, but it wasn't a mental thing. It was Volkanovski is probably top 5 best fighters that's ever been in the UFC. And you can argue about it with me in the comments if you want, but Volkanovski is very good, and I'm not a Volk fan. Volk's stance switching and leg kicks and speed, his diverse attack. It was a 4th-round stoppage, but like even Volk is asking him in the fight, like, "Are you good, man? Because I'm really touching you up." Max Holloway, it's Max Holloway, guys. Like, you don't listen to this podcast and not know about Max Holloway. If you listen to this podcast, you like Max Holloway. Everyone likes Max Holloway. The dude went on like a 13-fight streak with tons of great wins, 2 of them including Jose Aldo. Both of those are finishes, finishing Brian Ortega, finishing Anthony Pettis. Anthony Pettis was like just outside of his like prime in that moment too. The the 2 wins over Jose Aldo, super impressive. The Dustin Poirier fight, he went up to 155 and fought for that interim belt and still looked good against Poirier. Still to this day, Poirier says that was his toughest fight. He said he learned the most about himself in that fight with Max Holloway. Max Holloway had him in trouble multiple times in that fight, as Poirier had him. The win against Frankie Edgar was his first defense back after losing up at 145. He came back down to 155, came back down to 145, and that was his first defense after that loss. He unanimously, cleanly beat Frankie Edgar, but I do think that loss to Poirier up at 155 definitely made him fight a safer fight. First fight with Volk, he lost. That's when he originally lost the belt. That split to Volk, like, that's not a robbery, but he did beat Volk in their second fight, in my opinion, by a crosshair. Close fight. But when you're getting dropped to a knee, you're getting head kicked and all that, you're in the most trouble, especially by the scoring criteria like that we go by today, with which damage is the number one scoring criteria. After that, he fought probably the best performance, top 5 best performances in the UFC ever against Calvin Kattar, where he's like talking to DC and Dan Hardy. Then he had a fucking brawl with Yair Rodriguez. Incredible fight with Yair. His recent loss to Volkanovski in their third fight, Volkanovski really leveled up, and I think Max Holloway might be finally slowing down a little bit. Volkanovski painted his face red. He looked like he was wearing a Halloween mask. And not a Halloween mask like this Halloween, but he got beat up really bad for 5 rounds. Then he came back and cleanly beat Arnold Allen, and Max Holloway is still making improvements. Like, the dude is a great body puncher, a great body kicker. The kicks he was throwing against Arnold Allen were beautiful. And he's, hurt Volk with kicks. He loves to throw that spinning back kick to kind of he'll throw a combination, and then if he sees you skirting out one way, he'll try to throw that spinning back kick to force you against the warning track and get you up against the cage. And then that's where he'll start landing his combos. He's a tidal wave of a fighter where his first round, he may drop, he may win. He'll definitely start putting a jab on you right away. And he'll start throwing 2-punch combinations, 3-punch combinations. He'll start throwing 2-punch combinations and finishing with like a shovel hook to the liver. And then he'll start throwing 3-strike combinations where he's throwing a 1-2 and then a body kick. And then maybe he's switching stance and then throwing a high kick. Maybe he's switching stance and then just throwing another, jab cross. He will, once Max Holloway really gets rolling, he's throwing like 7, 8, 9, 10 punch combinations where he's throwing kicks, switching stance. He's good everywhere. One thing I would have liked to see him incorporate into his game is maybe a couple more knees, like some jump knees, stuff like that. Maybe kind of do something that Sandhagen's doing. But who knows? We could see that this weekend, especially against someone that I think might be kind of a sitting duck against him. I just don't know what Zombie can do to win a fight like this. Unless he like really hurts Holloway with like a crazy head kick and then takes him down and submits him or something crazy. But I just see Max Holloway putting a jab on him. Korean Zombie, super hittable. He's very defensively porous. And this could be one of those things where like we get like 2 10-8 rounds. Or like maybe Zombie wins the first round because Max just made his reads, and then Max cleanly wins the second round, gets a 10-8 in the third round, and then gets like a doctor stoppage or something like the Ortega fight. Like, this is Max's speed, his footwork, his athleticism, his shot selection, he could just do so many things. Korean Zombie is the more powerful dude. Like, the way he uppercut Frankie Edgar and like took him off his feet was incredible. But like, Max is just gonna eat that shit. The dude brawled with Dustin Poirier up a weight class against Dustin Poirier. Not many dudes win brawls against him. Yeah, you got to pick. I could go on and on forever about him because I personally have tiers of favorite fighters. And like my number one tier is two fighters. It's Anderson Silva and Khabib Nurmagomedov. And then my second tier is like Max Holloway, Dustin Poirier, maybe Stipe, and so on and so forth. So Max Holloway is on my second tier of like favorite fighters. I really love Max, and that's not why I'm picking him here. I just don't see what Zombie can do. And both these guys are getting older, but Max is still young. Max has taken the most significant strikes in the UFC. He's also given the most. It's just going to be like a striking match where if it's 3-1, 4-1 when it comes to volume, if we get the striking totals come out on this fight and it's like Max landed 350 strikes and Zombies landed 100, because Max will stay in the pocket. Max is hittable. Max will stay in the pocket, but he's just going to lace Zombie up with so many shots. Zombie's going to look like Max had cheese graters in his hands. I'm going with Max Holloway again. That's the show, guys. Check the kick. I'm glad you tuned in. I hope you watch the fights this week, and I hope you enjoy them, but I hope you're not up. Unless you're in another part of the world listening to this, hope you're not up that early, but if you are, good for you. I will catch the fights probably on tape delay because I'm going to maybe sleep in. Work's been busy this week for me. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I'm your host, Devin. Enjoy the fights.